Hi, this is Regina Roy Favors coming to you with a social psychology topics lesson. And so the title of this lesson is Identity in Romantic Relationships. And I basically just want to introduce you to social identity and role identity. And this lesson is very important because of the way that we see ourselves in relationships and the way other people see us in those relationships can oftentimes be incongruent. And so it takes a little bit of time to understand the role you will play, and that basically means consistently play. Oftentimes people struggle with you because you say you're one thing, but you act another way. So take some time to go through this lecture, like the video, hit the subscription button, as well as the notification bell if you are interested in further videos. This is Identity in Romantic Relationships, Introduction to Social Identity and Role Identity. This lecture is subject to fair use, so I'll comment, criticize, offer some scholarship, as well as teach. What is social psychology? Social psychology is the branch of psychology that deals with social interactions, their origins, and their effects on individuals. Each person's behavior is influenced by the social environment in which the behavior takes place. Social psychology is the scientific study of behavior of individuals within both social and cultural settings. It is the study of human social behavior that is distinct from the study of social activity of laboratory animals. It utilizes the scientific method to study human behavior. Beginning in the United States at the end of the 19th century, research in social psychology emphasizes scientific study of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors as psychological variables influenced by actual and/or implied presence of other people. It is important to study social psychology because it helps to predict behavior patterns before they occur and to design interventions as solutions. So here's a quick research disclaimer. The ideas represented within this audio lecture do not reflect empirical research. This research does not directly utilize a survey and/or measurement tool. However, the ideas are supported by empirical research. Statistics are gathered from statistics gathering organizations and empirical-based journals. This PowerPoint audio lecture begins the research process for developing research hypotheses and survey instruments. It also extends the research conducted during a previous series, Understanding Relationship Failure, which is available on YouTube. By the end of this lesson, students will be able to do the following: explain the difference between social identity and role identity, explain commitment to identity within different contexts, explain our connections to groups using both our social identities and role identities, define self-verification, and then analyze how social stereotyping contributes to depersonalization. How we view the self is important, but how we view and interpret what others say and perpetuate about the self is equally important. People often hold a distorted view of their self-concept because of the roles they play within social groups. How we view ourselves individually is important because once we assume a social identity, it is further guided by social dictates, expectations, and responsibilities. This may lead to the incongruency we feel in romantic relationships because we struggle to sustain a personal identity. Social stereotyping contributes to depersonalization. To guard against losing one's personal identity within a romantic relationship, the goal should be to analyze how social expectations affect how we think of the self and design strategies that help us as individuals maintain our own individual standard. This is social identity versus role identity, how we self-categorize. All right, so there are different types of identities. We have a regular social identity based upon categories and groups, and then we have our own role identity that we sort of we mechanically operate under, right? So social identity theory, categories or groups. The self is reflective. It can take on itself as an object and can categorize, classify, and name itself in relation to other social categories. This is called self-categorization. A person has knowledge that he or she belongs to a social category or group. Through self-categorization, people notice their similarities and differences between in-group and out-group persons, respectively. So you can look at social identity in terms of racial, ethnic identity as well. You can look at it just simply as gender, identity. So we have all females here. We have all males here. Now we basically have a category for transgender, social identities. And so we can also look at it again on race, right? So we have all black people over here. We have all white people over here. So all the black people within their social category or group know each other. We know that we're black, right? And then anyone who does not look like black in terms of skin tone or in terms of just racial, ethnic identity, they would be perceived as out-group, right? You have people who are black in other countries that their skin tone tells us that they are black, but they may be Cuban, they may be Dominican, they may be Spaniard, from a different country, French, right? Then we have identity theory in terms of roles. So through self-categorization and identity is formed, and that identity in terms of roles would be how we function within the dynamic of a social category or group. Social categories precede individuals. So it is kind of interesting that when the doctor delivers the child, the infant, the doctor does not say, okay, you have a black girl, you have a black baby, you have a white baby. No, the doctor says you have a girl, you have a boy, right? But once we leave the womb and we enter into society, we enter into a society that is already structured, economically, financially, socially, ethnically, racially, right? So individuals are born into an already structured society. Once in society, people derive their identity or sense of self largely from the social categories to which they belong. So there is a sense of self within your own ethnic group or within your own gender-based group. And then there is a sense of self that you hold for your own identity. So similar to social identity theory reflects the components of a structured society. As these authors suggest, in identity theory, the core of an identity is the categorization of the self as an occupant of a role and the incorporation into the self of the meanings and expectations associated with that role and its performance. You can always look at that in terms of, say, the social category of a family dynamic. So everyone occupies a role. I am the oldest daughter. I am also the oldest sibling. And then I have two siblings under me. And then there's the middle child. So there's psychology research on the oldest child, and then there's a lot of psychology research on the middle child. That person is serving in the middle between two siblings, right? And that person functions as a middle child, and then I function as the oldest child. So when we look at social identity theory in contrast to identity theory, we think about group formations, right? So this social identity theory deals with intergroup relations based upon what one becomes as an in-group member, being like others in a group, seeing things from the group perspective. So I was in I was on student government council at my college. And so there's a way that you function as part of a member on student government. You could be a member, or you could be a group that is representing as a member on the council, right? So there's intergroup relations based upon what one becomes as an in-group member. So I'm part of an in-group, the larger student government council, and then once I leave that larger student government council, I go to an individual group. That could be any type of, it could be a cultural group, it could be another functioning type of group. And then being like others in a group, seeing things from the group perspective. So I'm going to end up holding two types of perspectives. I'm going to hold a perspective as being part of a student government council member, and then I'm going to hold a perspective as being part of a group club member as well. And then identity theory deals with role identity, acting, fulfilling a role, coordinating actions with role partners, manipulating the environment to control the resources on the role. You can look at this still from the student government aspect or the family dynamic. So if we look at it from the student government aspect, once I leave the council and I get into a group club member or something like that, I'm going to also have an individual role. So I can still serve as member, but I can also serve as parliamentarian. I can serve as the president of that group, the vice president, any sort of type of function that club offers, right? If you look at the family dynamic, each of us still has an identity within the larger social identity of the family. So we all have chores that we have to complete, right? I wash the dishes, my brother sweep the floor, right? And another sibling takes out the trash. So we're all coordinating actions, and we are all up under the larger parental guiding force, right? There are expectations. By the time mom gets home, we should have already had X amount of things done, right? But then what happens when one sibling decides that he or she does not want to take out the trash? Then there's a lack of coordination. So now that person is not acting in his or her role. That person has abandoned their role, the function that they're supposed to do on that particular day, right? And then what happens with that person who decides not to wash the dishes or something like that, or sweep the floor, they begin to manipulate the environment to control the resources under the role after they've been punished. So mom comes home, she sees the trash is not taken out, she gets upset, and she puts that one sibling on punishment. Okay, that person can't watch TV. Well, the person can be in their room, but the TV is still going on. Okay, the person is mad and everything, and it's not fair or whatever. And then he does this again, and then this time there's the parent says or realizes that he can still hear the TV. So even though he's not watching the TV with his eyes, he can still hear it. And so the parent comes out and says, you know what, all of y'all gonna be on punishment. Turn off that TV. So now he has manipulated the environment to control the resources. So the TV is no longer a resource for us, because now he has created a situation under his role using lack of coordination. All right, so these authors concluded that individuals who identify with the group feel a strong attraction to the group as a whole, independent of individual attachments. So you see this a lot with a lot of the protest movements and protests and movements, right? Everyone is sort of what the politicians are saying and the media are saying. They are all becoming tribal. So now they identify with, say, Black Lives Matter, or they identify with Time's Up, or they identify with Me Too. Then you have KKK, and then you have the neo-Nazis, right? And irrespective of individual attachments, they feel a strong attraction to the group. That is something in that group that is pulling them like a force to join it, right? These authors concluded under identity theory that by taking on a role identity, persons adopt self-meanings and expectations to accompany the role as it relates to other roles in the group, and then act to represent and preserve these meanings and expectations. So if we go back to the example of the student government, we all know that on any sort of board or membership or anything like that, there is always a parliamentarian. And the parliamentarian is following the Robert's Rules of Order. And it's the parliamentarian that feels like they are responsible for keeping order, right? That's their role. They are like that, right? So initially they may sign up to be parliamentarian and come to fulfill that as a role identity within the group. But then once they realize they have a lot of power being parliamentarian, in the fact that that they have to keep order, so anyone who gets out of line, that they can use Robert's Rules of Order to sort of get everybody in line, they begin to feel importance from that. So then that basically extends to them adopting self-meaning, that I am important because of the role that I fulfilled. And so any challenge to that role, like someone coming along and saying, man, it don't take all of that, man, take just be cool, it's not that serious. Well, you have to keep the minutes, you have to keep order, you have to have a report. So the person can reply, yes, it is important, I'm the parliamentarian. So they will act also to preserve the meaning of what a parliamentarian is and what role identity is in terms of their identity, and then in terms of the larger social identity. So social identity, the group is seen as a collective of similar persons. They identify with each other. In-group members hold similar views and see themselves as similar in contrast to out-group. So, I mean, if you are in a room full of black people, you all know that you are black. If you are in a room filled with white people, you all identify with each other. You are seen as a collective of similar persons. You could also be a collective of similar persons attending a business and networking event. You are all business people. Or you can be a collective of similar persons visiting a job fair. You are all looking for work, right? And then identity theory, the group is seen as a set of interrelated individuals. The role identity is an expression of interconnected uniqueness. Relations are reciprocal under identity theory. They are not parallel. So again, if you look at the student government context, in the larger group, I mean, if in the club you have members who are, the group is seen as a set of interrelated individuals, that you are part of this one club and you are all, say, like the finance club. You know, you have interrelated goals, right? You are using the club as to put it on your resume and also to learn and network. Okay, and then relations are reciprocal, that in certain contexts, if you do this for me, I do this for you, but they're not parallel. People are tied organically to their groups through social identities. They are tied mechanically through their role identities within groups. So it's automatic that it's organic that you are tied to a particular social identity. Like I said, you are all part of one race, or you are all part of one family dynamic, or you are all part of one student government. But what you do within that group is more mechanical, because now you are functioning within the group, and when you are out, when you don't function, it becomes less mechanical. But how does the person act within the group beyond self-categorization? The better word is enact, not act. And if you think about enact, you think about it in terms of legislating, right? You are legislating your identity.
or the social identity theory in the social group or category is legislating how you should act, right? What identity does the person enact as a result of being in a group and or fulfilling a role within that group? So now we're talking about the person identity. The person identity. So remember, we were discussing the social identity and then the role identity. Now we're going to get into the person identity. And remember the parliamentarian as I go through this. The person identity is conceptualized as similarly to both identity theory and social identity theory. The person identity is the set of meanings that are tied to and sustain the self as an individual. These self meanings operate across various roles and situations. This means that there may be overlap between personal identity and role identity. An example would be masculine gender or role identity, but mastery in terms of person identity. The person who suggests he is competent is hinting at mastery. So it's obvious that gender would be related to role identity. This is a female role, this is a male role, right? But mastery is related to sort of like that learning goal orientation I was talking about, that you are pursuing mastery of something. And you are now making the fact that you are parliamentarian of a student government council part of your person identity. That you know the rules. You are a master of the Robert's Rules of Order book, right? And you know when someone is getting out of line. So this is now becoming part of your person identity, and you will more than likely go into other areas of your career where you are responsible for adhering to rules and regulations because you tend to be a master of it. You have to be a master of Robert's Rules of Order because it's very easy to get out of line within a larger group of 50 plus members. And you still have to be able to submit a report officially to the board, to the university, to the faculty or whatever. And so you have to have order. And so the fact that you have taken it on as a role and now you give it even more significance, and that it now becomes part of your person identity is significant. It is you on the road to mastery. When does an identity become activated? How much does commitment to the identity affect the social, the role, and the person? So if you think about the parliamentarian, the person is not just taking a job just to take the job, that they are committed to being parliamentarian for however long, right? The activation of an identity in a situation allows individuals to accomplish their personal and or social goals. The source of such activation is left to individual and situational variability and apparently does not depend on social structural characteristics. So the source of such activation is left to individual and situational variability. So when you start believing that the parliamentarian role has become part of your person identity, you activate it, right? Then it is based upon your individual beliefs about it and then the situational variability. So it may not be situational for you to do it outside of that larger social group of student government. That people at the house don't want you to be a parliamentarian. All the roommates that you have are going to be upset with you when you try to be a parliamentarian at the house. It is only applicable to a particular context, situational variability, meaning that within the context of that student government meeting is where you want to be a parliamentarian. You won't be a parliamentarian when you go to the president's office. To the student government president's office. You're not taking minutes. You're just going for a meeting. And anyway, usually there's a secretary who takes minutes. So it's not for you to operate or administer Robert's Rules of Order within that individual meeting because there is a secretary who has to fulfill his or her role in that way. Activation of an identity requires commitment to that identity. So according to these authors, commitment has two aspects. So you have quantitative and qualitative. The number of persons to whom one is tied through an identity. So in terms of parliamentarian, right, if we think about that, the parliamentarian is tied to the administrator people. So that's the president, vice president, anyone else, right? And the parliamentarian is tied to the council, the student government council, where everyone meets, right? But the parliamentarian is not tied to the individual clubs and groups, right? Only if they are requested to do so. And then qualitative, the strength or depth of ties to others through an identity. There is more depth and strength of the parliamentarian tied to the administrators and to the larger student government body than to the individual group members. Commitment to the identity requires, however, depersonalization, which is defined as seeing the self as an embodiment of the in-group under social identity theory. So we are all under this sort of one group. It could be a race-based group. It could be a gang. It can be any type of collection of individuals that are calling themselves a group, right? So the longer you stay in the group, the less you have in terms of personality. You may fulfill a role and give that role significance, but you are now part of the group. When you see a gang of Crips and Bloods, or a gang of KKK or neo-Nazi, or even the people who walk in the protest movements and things like that, we don't look at them as individuals anymore. We look at them as an embodiment of the in-group. So anyone who is on the sidelines watching the protest movements, the people in the protest movement walk the streets, we are considered that out-group. We are not the embodiment of the in-group if we're sitting down and not walking with them. So commitment to the identity also requires self-verification, seeing the self in terms of the role as embodied in the identity standard. So if we're looking at it at a gang, the identity standard is usually blood in and blood out, right? That if you want to get out, it's blood out. But you're not going to wake up all of a sudden and say, I know I'm going to put in my resignation, I'm leaving the game. No. The identity standard is once you are in, you are in. You are part of our game, right? So then you self-verify. And that's really meaning that the longer you stay in that game, the longer you verify that you are part of that game, right? When the identity is activated, self-verification occurs. The person behaves in a way that maintains consistency with the identity standard. So you don't have off days. Only the leader could take off, right? But if you're going to go out and do something, whatever it is you're going to do as a group, the identity standard is we all stick together. We don't. If you think about Navy SEALs, their motto is, or their identity standard as a group, and then individually, everyone self verifies. We don't leave our men behind, right? The identity standard is we don't leave our men behind. So then it's up to you individually to self-verify. Every time you see your man left behind, you go after him like Forrest Gump did with Bubba, right? I have to go back and get Bubba, right? And so because he was part of a larger identity standard. Depersonalization involves social stereotyping, group cohesiveness, ethnocentrism, and collective action. Self-verification involves role-taking, role-making, and group formation. So if you look at depersonalization involving social stereotyping, it's like we know of this one group as being this one group. Never mind that the individual people within the one group are successful and doing well and are not criminals. But we will take this one group of people, it could be Black, Asian, Latino, right? And we would take this one group of people and socially stereotype that group as if all the people in that group are crime types of people or lazy types of people, right? And we are essentially depersonalizing them. You could say that about how men see women, calling them sluts and whores. You can say that how women see each other, calling themselves bitches, right? We are, socially stereotyping, and we're basically, taking collective action, right? The processes of depersonalization and self-verification show us that membership in any social group or role includes two important aspects. One's identification with a category and behaviors that we associate with the category. So your behavior does dictate how long you stay within a particular type of role.
In conclusion, one of the most important takeaways from this discussion is focusing on how depersonalization affects our individual and collective decisions. We are expected to depersonalize to fit in within a collective group, which may be socially designed and or culturally designed. The roles we play within that collective group change despite our desires to sustain the role we are either given or the role we assume. We make it work within that role. However, depersonalization does not afford anyone a stable role and a social position in society. Both role and social identities are always challenged in different contexts. Finding our voice and our standard in designing what our role will be in romantic relationships is most important for making the relationship work long term. We change roles too many times because we do not know who we are. Self-reflection is key. All right, so hopefully you were able to gain insight from this video discussion. Please like, subscribe, and visit. So please like the video, hit the notification bell for more discussions. I am re-uploading all of my audios, so I needed to make some changes to them. You can visit my website for more content at reginayfavors.com. If you want to send me an email, you can send an email reginayfavors@yahoo.com. Please also purchase the book. It's going to come out in spring 2021. So I had to make changes to my book to update it, and I also updated the title. So the original title was Bait, Hook, and Switch, Confessions of a Rebound Girl, and I have updated the title to Toxic Encounters, Why People Pursue Rebound Relationships. So right now I'm still basically editing it, and I want to make it available in spring 2021. So thank you very much for visiting my channel, and I am Regina Y. Favors. Have a great day.